Okay, so here we are. Two hypnotherapists, two havening therapists, two NLP therapists, and two people that have been working quite a lot with people who have come out of the void and darkness of narcissistic abuse. So my name is Ulf Sandström, and I call these interviews or dialogues remarkable change because often that is what's needed. And you are my absolute favorite when it comes to delivering a structured way of combining many methods. So Rania Fraser, please present yourself.
I'll present myself. Well, thank
Yeah.
you, Ulf. Thanks for having me. You already gave me a nice introduction. So my name is Rania Fraser, and I'm an award-winning narcissistic abuse recovery coach. I'm based in the UK, but I work internationally. And I'm super passionate about the healing and the recovery from complex trauma and women's mental health in general. And yeah, that's another thing we have in common, right?
Yeah, it is. And also, I might add that I'm also very active in an organization called the Peaceful Heart Network, together with my colleague Gunilla Hamne, and we focus on helping vulnerable communities, usually after maybe in post-conflict or nature catastrophe or refugees. So our baby has been seeing what can be done about traumatic responses, because there's a big misunderstanding that trauma is lifelong, and that's the same with recovery from narcissistic abuse, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, because, it's a common narrative that, well, there's nothing you can do about it. It's just how it is. And I know for a fact that that's not true. So,
yeah. So we both know that. I literally had, I don't know how many clients. I mean, I stopped counting at 1,000 actually. So it's bundles of clients and experience, and seeing time after time that traumatic responses can be resolved.
mhm.
So when it comes to, for example, working with military or firemen or first responders of any kind, usually there's this issue with PTSD to start somewhere, because it stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. And in those professions, they don't want to be disordering anybody, because that's against the profession. And I keep saying it's not a disorder, it's a defense system.
Absolutely.
So I usually say the abbreviation is right, but it's actually perpetuating traumatic stress defense.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's cranked up too high, you need to turn it down a bit, but you don't want to get rid of it, because you should be warned intuitively when you're picking up signals of something that you missed before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, what we are dealing with narcissistic abuse is a whole different set of trauma, right? So if you compare it to military or natural catastrophes, sorry, someone keeps sending me messages. um, it's very different, because it's one singular event oftentimes, whereas when we deal with abuse, it's very complex, it's multi-layered, and it's not just the immediate trauma that has happened, which would potentially be more in line with PTSD. It also involves the developmental trauma, because it's literally a door, right, that's opening up. And that's why it makes the recovery approach so different to anything else really that's out there with regards to traditional therapy.
It actually, I think it aligns a little bit with people who are refugees who have been running away from, because that's also kind of what they call complex trauma, right?
Yes.
Because there's so many layers in it, and there's shame, there's guilt, there's survivor's guilt, there's society, how they look at you. You might have been not believed by authorities or police or social services. Your kids, you might believe that your kids will be taken from you. I mean, there's so many layers of everything in this specific.
Yeah.
But let's just say, some things.
It's very similar. Like from what you've just explained, like if you hadn't mentioned the refugees before you started talking, all of that applies to abuse survivors.
Yeah, I mean, you are a refugee from the war of 2 people or 3 people, and in other cases, you're a refugee from a whole country. But you are basically a refugee from a war you didn't ask for.
Yeah, and that's very important to understand, right? Because a lot of abuse survivors, first of all, they don't realize that they are being abused. And then once they do realize that, hold on a second, something's really wrong here and this is really not okay, they talk themselves out of it, right? And then they may be stumbling across PTSD, complex PTSD. They look at the symptoms, but they still talk themselves out of it because they go like, well, I haven't been to war, so that's not me because what happened to me is not as bad as that. However, it is bad in a different context, in a different way. The damage, however, is as severe. And as you just said, it's a different kind of war, right?
Yeah. I mean, so the first point we're making is complex trauma or single event trauma, PTS or CPTS, whatever it is you call it, it can be resolved. And it cannot be resolved by only talking about it. That can actually make it worse.
Yes, absolutely.
Because it's in the body. It's not in the mind. It's in your amygdala. And the amygdala doesn't talk.
Yeah. No, it's very true. And literally everybody who comes to me, and you probably have had the same experience, they are so frustrated with not getting any results, putting all their time in, the money, the work to go and do, traditional talk therapy, but nothing is getting any better. And I had the same frustration when I was recovering myself from narcissistic abuse. And I don't know if you want to call it German efficiency, right? I need results, and I just could not accept that this would just be it, right? So everybody who comes to me is so frustrated with the lack of results, but then at the same time, they're also determined that that's not going to be it. And obviously, we are here to say, yes, there's actually something you can do about it. However, talking is not going to resolve anything, because very simply your brain cannot distinguish whether something's happening for real or whether you're imagining it, right? So if you go to talk therapy every week and you talk about it over and over and over again, for your mind and your body, it's like you're re-traumatizing yourself, right? Over and over and over again. Whereas the damage is on a much, much deeper level, which means the healing also needs to happen on a much deeper level.
Right. And to quickly back to the point you were saying, where a lot of people in these relationships who find themselves in a relationship where they are actually being abused, they normalize it gradually. So the metaphor is that of the slowly boiled frog that doesn't realize it's being boiled until it's cooked, right?
Yeah, I always wonder who did that experiment. It's horrible.
We don't want to know. I like frogs. But the thing is this. The thing is this. I often find, and I don't know if you find the same thing, but I find that my clients, more often women than men, but men as well, who have been in a relationship and who have been slowly cooked like a frog, actually, they're intelligent, they're empathetic. I mean, they're almost overly empathetic. They often come from a background, from a family that sometimes had challenges, either with not getting enough attention because the parents were too busy, or getting lack of attention because somebody had a difficulty, like the ACE, the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. But they're kind of primed to be caretaking and loving and intelligent. And what happens, to my mind, in a lot of these cases is the reason they're lured is because a narcissist is really good at that. I mean, that's what they do. They prey on people where they can press those buttons that make people go, finally somebody who understands me.
They all have a sob story, right?
Yeah.
But something to keep in mind, and obviously, they have their sob story, but the first thing to keep in mind is, well, that's their thing, right? So they would have to sort that out. Nobody can sort this out for them, same as nobody can sort stuff out for you. You have to do that yourself. Another thing to keep in mind here is that they very intentionally tell the story in a certain way that pushes the buttons, right? Because what a narcissist does is they match and mirror you to such an extent that what happens is you actually fall in love with yourself. So they tell you exactly what you want to hear. They tell you exactly what you need to hear. They're very, very observant. And it's literally, it becomes like you're looking in a mirror, but you don't realize that. So any kind of sob story they tell you, it's really specifically catered through their observation skills to the victim, because they know exactly that that's where the hook is. And as you said, the underlying conditioning of abuse survivors, they're all good people. They all have a good heart. They all care very deeply. They love very deeply. And that's where the hook comes in, because instead of saving themselves, they would always put everybody else first. And that's, of course, that's a faulty program that's running, right? And that's also what gets them into trouble.
And that's why it's something they get into trouble multiple times as well, because I mean, they're falling into the same trap, and they get into this relationship. They realize it seems too good to be true at first. And I often quote my grandmother. She would say, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is, right?
Yes.
So if you're over the heels and he is so charismatic and he really understands me, and for the first time, it's like, oh, wow. And you know, the sex is fantastic and he really caters to my every need. And, you know, I just feel real for the first time. And, you know, some friends are going, yeah, but have you checked out his previous relationships? Did you talk to any of his girlfriends? Oh, he told me about them. They're all crazy, you know.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
and it goes on, you know. So when it seems, I mean, I'm not saying you should be warned if you're in love, but I'm just saying, you know, think twice, because this is a pattern that I hear over and over again, because that's what they do. They fire it up. I mean, it's basically like a drug dealer. That's what one client compared it to. She said it was like he got me hooked on the drug, and the drug was him.
Yeah, so he's a drug and a drug dealer at the same time, which then obviously gives him complete control over how you're allowed to feel, right? And the thing with a narcissistic relationship, and obviously narcissistic abuse can happen outside of a romantic relationship, right? So it can be at work, it can be family, it can be friends, it can be literally any kind of personal relationship. But we're
A mentor, a coach.
Yeah, so many actually. Especially self-help stuff, very dangerous. But I forgot now what I wanted to say. Yes. Oh yeah, we are talking about romantic.
So many names went through my head as well.
I know, same here. So I got a little distracted now. But what I wanted to say is we are obviously talking about romantic relationships here, and something to understand, and that's, if it hasn't happened to you, like if you talk to your family and your friends, and you know, you try to make yourself understood, and they just look at you like, well, you know, time will heal all wounds, snap out of it, get over it already, move on. Like all of this doesn't apply, but their brain actually cannot comprehend the trauma that has happened, because a relationship with a narcissist is nothing like a normal relationship. Because when we talk about that fire that's burning there, right, it's like instantly, when you look at a normal relationship, a healthy relationship, what would happen is you meet somebody, you get to know each other slowly, trust develops over time, right? Like they have to prove themselves to you that they are worthy of your trust. They have to put the work in. They have to show the actions, right? It's not about the words. And that's a very normal thing. Trust develops over time. Trust is never instant. However, when you get involved with a narcissist, what happens is that you completely skip that whole step, right? So you meet the narcissist and instantly, and it can literally be like this, like a switch, because they meet this need, like that little, you know, unhealed wound that's somewhere buried down there. You completely skip the process of a normal developing relationship, and you go straight into, you know, really immense trust and deep love. And what you will find is that your clients, they will refer to their soulmate. And
so that was the word in my head, on my tongue.
Really deep. And I mean, the idea of a soulmate, it's fantastic. Who doesn't want to have their soulmate? However, it is not a realistic concept as such, because what we are talking about is a very, very intense energetical bond, and that's created through the unhealed trauma that the narcissist taps into. So the victim then basically thinks they are madly in love, because obviously they fell in love with themselves, right? Of course. I mean, who's a better soulmate than yourself, right? And then they hook that in. But when you compare it to a normal relationship, I mean, I do have to say it is so much more exciting. And yeah, so while the mask is on, right?
I just need to say
good.
one thing here. Just anybody watching this, just so you know it, like Rania is saying, you were in a relationship that was narcissistic and you came out of it shattered, more or less.
Yes.
And you are rebuilt and you know it's possible. And the thing is this, it's not that the road needs to be long out of that. You need to take steps in a certain order. It's like anything. You cook a meal, you can't cook it in the wrong order, because then it's not going to be a cake at the end, But if you do it in the right order, and like we said in the beginning, because I mean, you have, sometimes we collaborated, and I've had you talk to some of my clients, just to basically, I can't sit there and say I was in that relationship and I'm here now and I made it, because I didn't, but I do have experience of it. But you can actually say that you were in it and you know that it's possible to get out. And that is something that I think everybody wants to hear when they're in that situation. And they want to know that it's not necessary to keep rehashing it and talking about it. And I mean, there's even the prolonged exposure therapy, which sometimes is used for this, where you record every sordid detail on a tape recorder, on your phone or whatever nowadays. And then you are supposed to listen to it until you don't react anymore.
The worst thing you can do. The worst
I'm sorry. In my mind, that's cruel. It's unnecessary.
Yes.
And it's a complete misunderstanding of the neurobiology of fight and flight.
Yeah, absolutely. And because I have the personal experience, I mean, obviously, while I was going through it, I never thought I would ever see the day where I am now, right? But I went on this mission to find something that would reverse the damage as effectively as it was caused. That was literally my mission. And once I did, then I created, as you know, a whole program around it, which is very, very specifically designed for
and a
that
number of
particular,
steps.
the particular purpose. And it follows a number of steps. It has a structure to it, because obviously, well, not obviously, what I found based on my own experience and working with my clients is that everybody's actually moving through the same motions. The time frame may be different. However, the motions, the stages of the recovery are all the same. And even though like every story, of course, is straight out of the movies, and we talked about this earlier, it's incredible. Like, you would think you only know that from, the movies.
And I just need to intervene there and say one little short thing. I said previously that prolonged exposure, I do not recommend it. I think it's a misunderstanding. And if anybody now is listening to this who went through that and came out well on the other side, I'm not saying that you can't, and congratulations and kudos to you for doing that. It is, however, a way that requires a lot of work and some pain, and there are easier ways today. I just want to have that said.
Right, and exactly that's the point. It doesn't have to be long.
No.
There is an actual methodology.
Methodology.
Thank you. Methodology, German. My apologies. Methodology, a structure to it. There's a step-to-step approach. Having said that, it doesn't have to be long if you have the right tools and the right support. It doesn't have to be painful. It can be very gentle and much easier than you would think. And that's very, very important for me, that that's an option for people, because that's exactly what the purpose was of my mission, right? To find that something that actually works, and that common narrative that there is nothing you can do about it, and that it will torture you for the rest of your life and nobody will ever heal for real. It's not true.
Yeah. And also we want to say that the intention of this, our dialogue here, is not to say that you should go to either of us. It's you go anywhere, but make sure that you avoid the kind of therapy that could actually make it worse, because we know we both, I get clients that have been to therapy over 5 to 10 years after an incident, and they're not well. And if I had a car and gave it to a garage and after 5 years it still didn't run, I would say maybe we should try a different garage. I'm just saying that. So there are two first steps that we agree on completely, because we work slightly differently, which, I mean, there's, my grandmother, again, she says there's 10 ways to skin a cat. So there's probably several roads to Rome, right? But there's one thing that you need to resolve before you can do anything. And that is the reactiveness of the body, the mammal we live in that reacts to all the triggers that have to do with this, that prevents us from thinking and mentalizing and doing anything about it, because the moment we're reminded of it, we go into a panic, because that's what that system is supposed to do. It's supposed to give us panic whenever anything reminds us. And there we both share, a method that's called havening, which is basically calming down the nervous system through a body-based approach. And
as our colleague Kate loves to call it, it's a CPR for the amygdala, right?
Yeah, you can call it that. Yeah. I usually call it emotional first aid. I mean, it's the reactiveness of the mammal that tries to, save you and your mind and your soul. So that's the first one. But even prior to that, you emphasize, and that's something I picked up from you. I wasn't as adamant about it because I didn't have that perspective. But you said that the one thing that has to be fulfilled if you really want to heal is you need to get away from that situation. You can't stay in touch and kind of see if things would turn out well, because it's like being in a car accident and you're in the middle of the road and you need to get away from there or you're going to get hit by the next car. You can't stay there.
Yeah, absolutely. No contact is rule number one for narcissistic abuse recovery. And if you go back to the addiction analogy we had, right? So the abuser is the drug and he's the drug dealer. The survivor is the addict. And you will often hear somebody, especially very much in the beginning when they don't have the language yet to explain, I don't know what's wrong with me. I feel like I'm an addict, or he's my drug. Like, that's literally the words they use. And it doesn't only feel like that, it's actually the case. So if you compare it to any other kind of addiction, of course, what you need to do is remove your supply.
Yep.
Right. Which is a very, very hard step to do. And going no contact is one of the hardest steps on the whole recovery journey. However, it is really essential for the recovery, because what it's really about is creating this really safe space that allows for the healing. And as long as you keep a door open, and you may have already blocked him and deleted him and whatever, but maybe there's like this one family member you got on really well, or
you have kids together. I mean, that's not easy.
Yeah, that's a different story. I'll touch on that like in a moment. But like if you keep like that back door open, like that one friend, mutual friend, or that family member, right? That literally will prevent the healing, because that safe space isn't intact. And to really recover from this, the supply needs to be completely cut. Now, however, as you just said, there are situations where the survivor shares children with the abuser, or they have legal proceedings happening. Maybe they run a business together. So they're
usually a really sly narcissist will make sure there is a child, there is a company together, there are economic things, because these are the ways of creating control. They will ask you to move in with them and sell your house and get rid of your apartment. We can do this together. We're soulmates. It's all fine.
Exactly. And then obviously in those situations where you cannot just cut the contact off completely because there are logistics going on there, in that case, it's so important that contact is highly modified. And when I say highly modified, ideally it should all go through a third party, a neutral third party. So not like a friend, a family member who's mediating there, but an actual third party, whether that's a solicitor or a mediator. There are apps.
Or a stalking center. I mean, there are centers for women who have come out of abusive relationships, which actually give that service depending on your country and location.
Yeah, I was just looking because I was just having this conversation. I don't know where I wrote it down. I was just having that conversation in one of my groups actually, because of course, some women have to deal with the whole custody thing and everything. There are actually apps out there, and I can share that with you. I
We
wrote
can
it
put
down
it in the
somewhere else.
comments. That's fine.
Yeah, where the communication is actually regulated through the app, which is also very helpful because it's monitored, it can't be changed. So when there are legal proceedings happening, there's a track record of
Oh,
the
that's good.
communication. It's something Wizard, My Family Wizard or something, but I'll give you that information. And any kind of personal interaction, if it's just like a chit chat, WhatsApp message or text or whatever, none of that. Like everything has to go at least through email, because email is the least
The
personal.
least secure thing ever.
Yeah, but ideally through that app, right?
Yeah.
Or through a third party. Any kind of interactions with the children need to be formalized and regulated, because that's another thing that they will do. They will use the children to create conflict, to
Mm-hmm.
keep the mother off balance, rearrange arrangements without notice, all those kind of things. And that's why it's so important that all of it is formalized. And one thing that actually one of my ladies mentioned, what really helped her, was she got a ring bell. Do you know what I mean? It's like the doorbell with the camera. It's
Mm-hmm.
called Ring. And she had that installed because the moment he rings the bell to pick up the kids, it starts recording. And
Yeah.
it records the audio and it records the visual. And then that transaction of, handing over the kids that's what it's all about. It's all neutral and it's all recorded. And that made a huge difference for her, to be able to maintain those boundaries that she needed. So, because obviously she's still in touch as well. However, she's also very much focusing on her healing. So there are ways to modify that contact, but the contact needs to be highly, highly modified. Otherwise, the healing will never happen, because there's always the drug.
Yeah.
And that
So
drug is very strong.
there's another aspect of that I've had. I'll just quote a mixture of clients here with some issues, and we can relate to them. So one client, she told me, at the time, I was asking myself, because everything was fine up to a certain point. Then when I started suspecting things weren't as well as I thought, he flipped at a certain point and went from totally charming to totally the opposite.
Yeah.
And when I told him that I would leave him, that's when things went really, really, really bad. And sometimes this happens when you go back, because you're going to give it one more shot because you have kids and stuff, and you're not sure and you're hoping. So it's really vital that you look into what might be going on before you give it that second chance, because it can become pretty violent. And also one of them said, looking back, I realized that he was a drug for me in the beginning, but I was a drug for him. I was his supply, but he knew that he was getting something from me, which was my energy and attention and everything else. But I didn't know that I was getting a drug from him. I thought it was love. And then looking back, she said, looking back, I feel like he was playing chess with me, and everybody around us was part of the chess game. So he would move forward a friend or a mutual friend, or something to do with the kids, or something to do with our economy, or something to do with whatever part that could be used as a threat in some way. And every time something happened, somebody would call me, and I thought this was a mutual friend. And here's what it becomes kind of shaky. It's a lot of times it's a mutual woman friend, maybe somebody that even was a friend of this person first, that is lured in by the narcissist and used to get them back. But he's also starting to have a relationship with that woman, and then starts to play them out against each other. So it's just a chess game.
It is, and it's very calculated. There is nothing, that kind of raises the question, are they doing it intentionally or not? Which at the end of the day doesn't actually matter. What matters is how they treat you, how they make you feel, right? But yeah, so with a narcissist, it's called like their gang, their fan club, right? They're called the flying monkeys, and
Yeah.
they were
Enablers.
obviously lured in exactly the same way. So there are basically two different kinds of people, right? One are the other narcissists, right? Because narcissists tend to surround themselves with other narcissists because that makes their behavior acceptable, right?
Normal.
Nobody's going to call them out on it because they all behave that way. And then you have the flying monkeys, and those are the empath, the wounded good souls that try to rescue and save. And all those flying monkeys, all those enablers, they obviously were lured in exactly the same way as the partner was once upon a time before the mask came off. But the flying monkeys don't know that version behind the mask yet, right?
Yeah.
And what also sometimes happens, and uh, usually when somebody then comes to me, they go like, oh, they get really upset about the new relationship the narcissist has now, right? And they want to go and they want to tell that new woman what a monster he is, right? Uh, but that doesn't even make any sense because somebody probably told them when they were in that position and they wouldn't listen, right?
And now they're the
Because they're
crazy
lured.
girlfriend.
Exactly, because they were lured
Crazy ex.
in. So somebody probably said, oh, like this and that. And they would go like, no, because he was so perfect. Well, she was so perfect, right? But now they're the crazy girlfriend and everybody, and then there is somebody else who gets lured in as well. So everybody who's around the narcissist and also the one that come out to, grab the supply back, they are just lured in exactly the same way.
Yeah. And also, I mean, we also talked about this before that we're not calling the perpetrator. I mean, we're just want to make sure that we're agreeing on this, that the perpetrator, a narcissist, also carries a wound, also carries low self-esteem, also carries a very fragile self-image that is defended in this way. That's why they need the narcissistic company. They need this supply of admiration. So it's not a person who actually believe they're God's gift to the world. It's a person who would like to be God's gift to the world. But when it's disproved, they get rage because that's
Yes.
the last thing they want to hear.
Yeah, and it's the same. It's the same concept for all of us, right? Because we're human beings, and we all carry what I call a glint. Like a trauma encoding a wound,
Yeah.
a little crack, like more than one actually. And they have that as much as the empath does as well. So whereas for the empath, certain triggers fire off about abandonment, fear of rejection, it's the same triggers that fire off there. However, the coping mechanism is different. And what it all comes down to, because as we said, they do have a sob story to lure their victims in, what it all comes down to is taking responsibility for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Because it's our glints, it's our wounds, it's our needs that need to be met. And there is no knight in shining armor who will come and save us. We have to put the work in. And the same applies to them. Nobody can ever save them because they would have to put the work in themselves. However, the difference between a narcissist and a non-narcissist, as a non-narcissist, you then go off and you do your healing work, you go on your self-development journey, and you heal yourself from the inside out because you have that awareness that something isn't working for you. Whereas a narcissist wouldn't have that. So they wouldn't go and get help because obviously, they're the king of the castle. The whole world revolves around them. There is nothing wrong with them. And that's also very important to understand as somebody who is involved with a narcissist and, thinking about giving them a second chance. They will not change because those conditionings, those unconscious programs, they are still running. And whether the mask is on or not, well, in the beginning, of course, they want you back, so the mask is back on, but you already know that it's going to come back off, and it will never change because they haven't actually changed, right?
Yeah,
And that's
exactly.
very, very important to understand, that when that draw comes in, that you want to go back.
So here's the thing. They're operating from a scheme and they're not ready to change. So there's loads and loads and loads of great YouTube clips about 7 signs it's a narcissist you're dating, 10 signs of this, 8 signs of that. And I mean, instead of looking at those signs, I would say that what you just said is probably, for me, the best indication if the person that you're dealing with has that tendency or not. It's if you take responsibility for your actions, then that means that you'll say, oh, okay, I guess I need to think about that. I need to look into that. That also means that when other people piss you off, you don't blame them for it. You say, I wonder how what my part in that was. You realize there is a your part, and you don't talk down to people because you don't believe you're above people. So it's so clear in the language and in the ability to accept that you have a part in stuff. But a narcissist will usually, in my experience, I don't know if you agree, will usually put all of that outside themselves. So they're going to tell you that you need therapy and you need to deal with your trauma and you need to do stuff, and everything they need to do, they will tell you. So a clear warning sign is when the person is talking about what you should do and not about what they should do, and where they're not accountable for anything of what they've done. And there's always, I say there's 3 things, they will excuse what they did because of this and that outside them, not their fault, or they will explain what happened. So there's an explanation and therefore it is invalid, or they will shift focus into something else, So you're saying, why did you actually hit me? You did push me into the wall. They're going, yeah, but this thing, and all of a sudden it's not about that anymore. You made me, my trauma, blah, blah. So shifting focus, explaining and excusing are like really good indicators. Not being responsible, never seeing your side in it, always telling other people what they should do differently.
Yeah. One thing that just came to my mind while you were talking, because you mentioned all the content that's out there and like the red flags and all of this, all of that. When we think about energy flows, where the attention goes, right? That's actually one problem with the healing, because everything that's out there, not everything, but the majority, like 99% of the content that's out there, the focus is on the abuser and what has happened. So if we focus on that, what do we get more of? We get more of what we focus on, right? So There are like all those like red flags. So how come we're not talking about the green flags, right? You already know what the red flags are. You knew right from the start. And you probably get that as well, Ulf, with your clients. Well, when they have this anger against themselves because they didn't know from the very first moment that there was something wrong, but they went for it anyway for whatever reason, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, everybody had. I keep asking. The thing is, I think the reason a lot of clients, people who have been in this situation, look back and want to read up on it and want to understand it is because it's not only because they want to understand what happened, it's because they want to avoid it in the future. And they believe that if they understand what happened, they can avoid it. But it's not that's not true, because that's not it.
Yeah.
They heal the trauma that put them in that place, so they don't have that need, so that button can't be pushed.
Exactly.
That's part of it. And so that's one part. And another part that you also make very clear, which I like in the way you describe it, is, the phases people go through. They come out of it, they disbelieve it, they try to understand it, they read up on it, they become experts on narcissistic abuse. They all of a sudden, they're everywhere. And here 2 things happen. One is they're prepared to tell the world because they want the world to avoid it, which means that sometimes they go out on, they tell people in media and friends, and sometimes
Everyone
they write a book about it. And at the time, it seems a great idea. But 5 years down the road, you want to move on and not be that person who was in that relationship. So for some people, it maybe isn't a good idea to, explain it to everybody and to really push that person out into the light and make everybody hate them or whatever, because it means you have enemies, and it means that you have this whole thing that will go with you. And the second thing is at least what you said, that when people have read up on it and they feel they understood it, and now they understand the signals, and now they know about narcissists, that's when they actually are at the highest risk of going back into a second relationship like that, isn't it?
Yeah, because they feel safe.
Yeah.
So the whole reading up and studying it, I mean, it's an obsession that all of us go through as a survivor, because we need to cognitively understand what has happened to us, because it really doesn't make any sense, right? It causes this cognitive dissonance where everything you learn is in such a contradiction with how you thought the world worked. So it's really, really important to read up and to gain all of this knowledge. It's a big part of the recovery journey. However, it's not where the healing happens. That's the cognitive understanding. The healing, as we said before, is on a much deeper level. And as you just rightfully said, the survivors, they become experts, like they can literally write PhDs on this topic. And then they go out there, and there are so many, if you look on Instagram now, social media accounts, and from there, the content is actually from a really bad place, which is supposed to support, but actually it hinders the healing more than benefit it, because it comes from a place of anger and hurt and resentment and hate, and which is understandable in one aspect because something really horrible has happened. However, as a survivor, if you want to actually heal from this, that's an energy you don't want to engage in. And just because it has happened to you and you have all this profound knowledge, that doesn't make you an expert on narcissistic abuse recovery, because you find all those narcissistic abuse recovery coaches now. And so that there's a huge step in between that. And as you said, once you have all this knowledge, it makes you feel very safe at that point, because
Yeah.
you understand. All of a sudden, something that doesn't make sense does make sense.
Yeah.
And then you
And
go
it's
out
and it,
there, and
yeah.
it's like, oh, I can spot them. I can smell them a mile away. And then they may meet somebody and who's really charming and really loving and nice and supportive. And obviously, they're very open about the trauma that has happened to them, because they are very aware. They're also very open about the topic. And they may even call that person out right then and there, because they sense that something is wrong. But then they will go there anyway just to prove themselves wrong, because oh, I'm being so paranoid, and just because something bad happened to me, and not everybody else can be a bad person. But that's the point where the repeat trauma then usually happens. And because very simply the knowledge is there, you have this full sense of security, of safety, because of the cognitive knowledge. However, the conditioning is still running in the background. The wound is still open. The need is still unmet. And then that other one comes in. And there are so many different forms of narcissists, because it's a spectrum, right?
Yeah.
And that might just be a kind of narcissist that you haven't come across before. They are much more skilled, much more subtle.
And
So
actually, I have run into clients that have run into people who specialize on this. And you actually, sorry to say, you find them among therapists, because what's a better place to find, to find what you're looking for than have them come to you?
exactly. You have
So,
that a lot with self-development, self-help courses, and it goes a little bit into the whole cult and sect
and cults
kind
and
of
sects, absolutely.
route. But it's exactly that.
Yep.
Because who goes into self-development, who goes in onto their healing journey and then studies those complementary modalities? If nothing had happened to you, those modalities wouldn't even be on your radar, because you would still be believing in everything that was supposed to work, which then turned out to not work, right? And yeah, as you said, what easier way to find your victim than engaging in those kind of communities, because they're presented on an open platter.
Spiritual leader looking to lead people, anybody who holds out a hand saying, I can fix you. Yeah. And that actually does make it, even harder in a way. But I mean, you should be aware about it, and you should have, that radar that you're having, have it out at least, more of the time, and then talk to people, get recommendations, see what people say. I mean, that's the advice I say.
Yeah, one thing about therapists, what I always share when I give talks and do workshops, if you're looking for a therapist to help with this, what's really important is, for one, well, I just wanted to say that I have the experience. So they have an understanding, because a lot of therapists, medical professionals, they simply don't, right? It's still a
No.
very new topic. They are usually not trained in a trauma-informed way. So what happens is they may try to apply textbook to something where textbook doesn't apply. So it's really important to do the research to see whether they do have the understanding. Also make sure that they have the right credentials in their modalities. Because again, with this whole self-help, spiritual healing, there is a lot of woo-woo out there, right? So really check the credentials, that to see that they went through a proper training process, that they had to actually, you know, put the work in to get those credentials. If they are registered, all those kind of things. Also,
And there are people who learn by experience and who are really, really skilled, who actually
yes.
have no training at all. I mean, village helpers and spiritual leaders that actually are the right kind of people, of the right kind of, in the right kind of place.
And then another thing is, the therapist should be really open for you to try out different modalities, should recommend, suggest, you know, encourage to explore, because that moment when somebody goes to you, this is that one thing that will fix everything. It doesn't work that way, because we are all different people, right? So recovery from trauma is literally a mix and match exercise. So
Yeah.
the therapist you want is somebody who understands the topic, but is also open, and most likely will then obviously have this network for you to explore different things, to find the tools that are right for you. And one indication, actually, because again, it's something that has happened to a lot of people, and it's natural that good people then turn into healers, or, you know, into the healing profession to help others with their experience and what has happened. So it's very important that the therapist has actually done, or coach has done, their own deep healing, because they will only help you to get as far as they've actually gone themselves. And you will notice that when you work with somebody and there is like this restlessness, and that's an energetic thing you can sense, because what happens is, if the therapist actually hasn't done their own healing, they get triggered themselves. So it's actually really, really important to go with the intuition, how it makes you feel in the space that the therapist holds for you. And that should be a very calm, safe space, where you feel very comfortable and not scared to do what you need to do.
Yeah, and
I
I
hope
would
that
like,
made sense.
yeah, absolutely. And I would like to add to that, to say that anybody who says, I know the exact method that's going to help you, I wouldn't believe them, because everybody's different. There's at least 8 billion different people on this earth. And, you know, also if somebody says, gets mad if you don't follow their steps and their technique, you know, I mean, certain things you should, like you need to break the contact, you know, that's non-negotiable. But then people can have, you know, other things that are in there that make it complex or not. And so it's about finding somebody that you feel is seeing your situation, understanding you, and not telling you that you should do something that is painful in any emotional, psychological way. Because I've been working with very severe traumas over 10 years. I mean, we're talking refugees, torture victims, whatever. I have never once ever had to make anybody go through their experience in a painful way again to be able to resolve it. It's not necessary. I've never found it necessary. I just want to say that. And if somebody did and it helped them, well, congratulations. I'm happy for you in every way. But I see so many clients that have been put through these cookie recipe programs for recovery that misses out that this one is different, you know, and this one you need to maybe go back, and because everything wasn't resolved that they thought was resolved.
Yeah.
So like you're saying, trauma informed, I mean, that's the key. It's a trauma that created the buttons that the narcissist could push. And then the narcissist pushed the buttons and created more trauma. So it's layers of trauma. And then you had to,
multi-layer.
and you told the world, this is the best relationship in the world. I'm so happy I found my soulmate. And it turns out that now you're a victim. Maybe you don't even want to tell the world that. So there's an additional layer of like societal shame, or who am I now? And where's my self-esteem? So last, I'd like to round this off because we need to talk more several times, but not too long so people can see it. So the thing is this, one question that I get a lot, and I know the answer, but I'd rather hear it from you, because I think you're in a better position to say it. So many people say, oh, but I forgot who I am. My identity is shattered. My whole self-esteem has flown out the window. It's in ruins. I don't know if I'll ever find out who I am again. Because that's the way it feels, right?
Yeah, you literally
But
do.
it's not true.
No, it's not true. Like, you are still inside. You just need to go and find her or him, which now sounds very simplified, but a big part of narcissistic abuse is that very calculated tactical erosion of the identity, to the point where you literally look in the mirror and you do not recognize the person that's looking back. Or you may not even see anybody when you look in the mirror. And that's also in case you are not aware just yet that you are in a narcissistic or in an abusive relationship. That's a very big indication you don't recognize the person looking back at you in the mirror. And you can literally describe it as, you think you died and you don't understand why you're standing here and you're breathing because you're just a shell. That's literally, I'm just explaining it to you all for your understanding. It's like, literally, you're dead, but for some reason you're not. Now, the core you will always be there, right? And it's very important, and it's a big part of the healing from narcissistic abuse, is to find back to you after narcissistic abuse. And the key to that is, and it's something that none of you who are watching probably wants to hear, it's self-care. And that is most likely something that goes so against everything that you think you are, because abuse survivors usually never ever really did anything for themselves. It was always about other people, right? Making other people feel good, having that sense of not deserving to treat themselves. However, this is something that you can learn, and it's much easier than you think, and it feels so good, which means once you actually push through this resistance that you're not supposed to be doing anything for yourself, the impact is very instant, and it's really the key to healing, because to be able to heal, you will need to reconnect with you, and that you is still there. So basically, healing from narcissistic abuse is recovering who you were always meant to be, because you didn't go anywhere. You literally just go and weed out your garden, and
I like the garden metaphor, because it's this: you have a plant and you water it, and it flourishes and it blooms, and something happens, so part of it doesn't grow, right? That's a trauma. So part of that plant that could have grown doesn't grow. Somebody comes, sees that wound, fulfills that need, and the plant goes, wow, finally I can flourish, which is, when you end up in this drug-like addictive relationship. And then it turns bad, it goes sour, and your self-esteem is destroyed. That's like no sun, no water for you, no nourishment, no air. So the plant is withering and looks in the mirror and says, God, I feel like shit. I look like shit. I hate myself. I'll never love myself again. Why is it like this? And then all of a sudden, instead of looking at yourself and talking about yourself, why not just take care of yourself, water yourself, get yourself out in the sunlight of some people that actually are good for you, that are loving, that are careful. Those are the sunlight, socializing, not hiding out, which is what most do. And all of a sudden, it's in the DNA of the plant to, once it gets the proper care and the proper sun and the proper nourishment, it will flourish again, and it will flower and bloom in ways it never could or did before.
Oh, I love this. I love it so much. Wow. I might nick that one.
Yeah, it's yours. It's open source.
Thank you. No,
everything
but it's
is everybody's.
it's so true, and it's very hard to understand while you're going through it, because obviously the situation, but it's very important to keep that somewhere in mind, which is also reason to actually go and get help, because if you can't hold that image right now because you're going through all of those challenges and all those struggles, mental health struggles, all of that, that person, whether it's a therapist or a coach, they will hold that for you, you know. So you don't have to do this on your own, and it's not a life sentence. And I know you want to wrap up. I want to say one last thing.
No, it's good. I just need to check.
Before we do, it's just picking up on something you said earlier, because you mentioned that one of your clients said, I didn't realize I was getting a drug from him. I thought it was love. I just want to be very clear here. The drug is love. That's the addiction. Yep. And it's an actual real addiction, because there is no higher high, right? No more powerful chemical reaction in the brain than love. So the love is actually the drug.
Yeah, but it's not real love. You're not getting real love. You're getting synthetic love from the narcissist.
Yes, but because, you know, it feeds into that unfulfilled need, it feels like real love. So,
and one more note, when you're saying, when anybody out there, you're listening to this and you're going, okay, well, I get the flower metaphor, but, you know, I don't think I'll ever be my old self. You don't want to be your old self.
No.
That's the one that got you in trouble. You want to be the flourishing self that you have no idea how good it is, because you've never been there yet. So once you allow yourself to go there, your older self is in the future, not in your past. You want to be your old, happy self 20 years from now, or 30 or 50.
Yeah, it's like version 2.0.
Exactly.
And that's the amazing version, because what the actual deep healing allows you to do is you can keep everything that you've always liked about yourself. And we all know that every single abuse survivor has so many good qualities and is such a wonderful, good-hearted, loving, caring person. But at the same time, you let go of everything that doesn't serve you. And this way you can create this really, you know, upgraded version, a 2.0 version. And as you said, bloom even nicer, even more, you know, lush than you could have ever imagined.
Exactly. And I also tell people, you know, when they go, oh, why did this happen to me? You know, I'm so worthless. If you were worthless, he wouldn't have seen you. If you were worthless, he wouldn't have picked you out, because it's not only about your wounds. It's also about your qualities. You have great qualities, and you were the limping antelope. So that's why he bit you. But it's because you have fantastic qualities so that, you know, if you had anything else but that, he would have picked somebody else. So obviously you have great qualities you're not aware about.
Yeah, because the more you have, the more they can take from you.
Exactly.
Right? And because it's their supply. So that's how you find all of a sudden really also highly successful women you would never put into that kind of box. You would never think that they would ever put up with anything like that in exactly those situations. And overnight, their whole life comes crashing down. And they're smart and they're intelligent and they're successful, right? But, you know, obviously, the more you have, the more you also have to take from you.
There you go.
It's like this never-ending feed.
Yep. There we go. So I hope, you know, if you listen to this and you think it's, you know, it gave you anything, you enjoyed it, there's something in it for you. If you disagree, just send us email. We'll write our email addresses in the comments field. If you disagree, that's fine. You know, we don't have the answers to everything. We have 1/8 billionth of it. So, you know, and that's how life works. But
we like the conversation around it as well, right? That's what we do. We talk about it.
Yeah, and we invite you to comment and talk about it, you know, spread it if it's good in any way. And also just remember, you know, that it's not a life sentence. You need to cut out of that situation. It's a slowly cooking frog. You're a good person and you can be better than you believe because you haven't been there yet.
Absolutely.
All right. Always a pleasure. I love talking to you. Thank you.